Cheers, David, and thanks for inviting me today. So I'm not going to talk about data protection in the usual context that many of you will be familiar with. Hopefully you're aware of Nine, but if not, I won't bore you with the details of who we are and what we do. What I've done is I've got a couple of slides to show you, talk through the context of how data and the use of data may change in the next few years, and what the opportunities are for schools, but also what are the ethical issues that can affect your students, but also your brand. And so I've got a couple of slides to set the scene, and then finishing off with those questions. We've got a framework. It's a 9 data privacy framework, and it's set up into 9 different sections, believe it or not. And the first one is all around leadership and governance. So it's within your school having an awareness of exactly what is happening with the personal data that is collected, where it's transferred to, who else uses in it, and how is it secured. And looking at the lens of ed tech, you as a school, you are setting up your students of accounts, and then they are using devices, they're using browsers, they are using applications on their iPads and tablets. And there's a transfer of data between all those different devices. And you have third parties then building up a picture of those individuals, of those children, of those members of staff, with many facets, the view to sort of influence the behavior of that child or that member of staff or yourself to do something. And being compliant with where we were with the GDPR is understanding what the risks are of the data that the school collects and how it transfers to those third parties. So the first question that you should be thinking of is as a school leadership team, if you're on the leadership or as a school, do you have an overview of the data and what's happening with it? And with the GDPR, you've seen an attempt by the European Union to set some parameters, to set some controls around personal data, about how it's collected and how it's used. And in the past 4 months, certainly in the past 4 months, from my perspective, you've seen a growing rhetoric and a growing movement, certainly within the media, around the protection of personal data, not just within the EU and not just specifically through the GDPR, but through the consequences of aggregation of data sets on our own lives. There was a good story in the New York Times around the Capitol and the sort of riot associated with the Capitol back in January, and the data sets that were generated from the people who attended the gathering in Washington. And how they could be uniquely identified back to their house, to actually where they came from, through the aggregation of data on their devices, and that's a very, very sort of well-known use case. And what we are seeing is a more than just the GDPR, a growing rhetoric within governments around who has control over data. If you look at what happened in Australia recently, there was with Facebook saying we're no longer going to publish Australian news on Facebook because we're going to have to pay publishers. Now, the reason why there was a big fuss about that wasn't necessarily about paying the publishers. It was the impact on democracy of actually what could be presented to a large population of individuals, what they would see, what they couldn't see, and now what essentially they wouldn't be able to see, and they would have to find more trusted sources to see the news that they wanted to see. And so you have this growing conversation around the use of data, and that's going to increase as we over the next few years, as data as a commodity there's less of it because it's better protected, and therefore it creates more value. And I'll sort of come onto this in the next few slides. And this is really, really interesting because this is the quote from 1881, but it's quite rightly reflects the lens of which the big the Facebook, the Apples, the Microsoft, the Googles, that they are currently perceived. and actually what governments around the world are trying to do to sort of control them, because there is no ethics, generally speaking, in the way that they are using personal data.
Just to say, Mark, that we're not seeing your slides yet.
Oh shit! Sorry. You're not. You could have said that earlier, David.
I thought this was the preamble.
Oh, this is it. The IT consultant again can't use IT. Right, you can see my slides. So all you missed, not that one. Okay, hello, that's me. Data privacy framework. There's 9 sections of it. One. This was the quote I was referring to. So you haven't really missed too much apart from my ramblings on too much. And then move on to the next slide is the common perception now is that what you read and the arguments that you have is all influenced by an algorithm. If you search for anything, if you search for airplanes on Facebook, you will soon get airplane news within your feed. If you look at any sort of thing, the algorithm is deciding what you see. If you look at the within an educational context, the IB in the summer used an algorithm to grade students, and that created a range of different bias for different groups of students depending on the demographic and the previous grades associated with those with the school. And moving forward, as I was saying, as data as a commodity, as governments put rings around it and force organizations to protect it, it becomes far more valuable. And within different industries, you are seeing this to evolve at this moment in time. So this example here is a car, and just think of the car as a student and the car company being the school. The school is receiving huge amounts of data on a student, and currently and in the future, and the collection of all that data together is inherently valuable. And within the context of Ford, just Ford monetizing the data that they collect within their cars suddenly doubles their valuation as a business. So when you look at the economics of international education, the economics have gone from 20 years ago, and David, you could probably better quote, 20 years ago, there was far more not-for-profit international schools. And now you've got it's predominantly a for-profit. It is a for-profit economy. And we're working with in Thailand currently. I did a webinar this morning, and the majority of schools are all for-profit schools. And the motivation, obviously, behind for-profit schools is to make money. I won't touch on this slide actually. So the through the lens of that the data that you have as a school is gaining more value, and that the economics of international education are that overall, you can see tuition being driven down by not-for-profits. There is an opportunity there for schools to be making money from the data that they collect, and they can use that data as a means to either increase their bottom line or to reduce the tuition for their students. In addition to that sort of mindset, there is additional regulation coming down the line, which relates to the second question. And that's called this e-privacy regulation. So as advancement professionals, essentially you are the pre-sales, and the way I look at it, you are the pre-sales to a student becoming enrolling within a school, and having a sales team at 9. A lot of the marketing is around collecting personal data, sending them marketing materials, tracking their behavior, seeing when they engage, looking at those engagement points on email, on your website, using the transfer of cookies from your email platform or final site onto their device to enable remarketing. So as they navigate around the website, they're always saying, for example, IS Brussels or whatever it is. The e-privacy regulation that's coming to play, certainly within the next 24 months, will affect every school around the world. And it doesn't allow you to do those things anymore without explicit consent of the individuals. So the whole use of e-marketing or digital marketing as a concept is no more. You cannot do that unless you get explicit consent. And it's unlikely that most people will give you explicit consent to be able to target them, profile them, and track them around the internet, and to be able to put different materials in front of them. So consequently, there needs to be, as David would say, like a reimagining of digital marketing on the pre-sale side of international schools. And that's going to have a huge impact in terms of, it's going to have an impact on people's roles. It's going to have an impact in terms of marketing spend. It may have an impact in terms of how you build your websites. It may be that you have to rebuild your website in the next 2 years because you can't do the things that your website's built to do. So you've got two important but very different concepts there. You've got one around the futuristic use of data to create, economical benefit for a school, and secondly, you've got a different change in regulation that's going to fundamentally affect what you currently do as that sort of. I know I may be saying pre-sales. It doesn't cheapen what you do, but that's essentially what it is. So, and they're two very different concepts in terms of how you may want to explore that in the next sessions in the breakouts, David.
Mark, thank you very much, and apologies for not making you aware that the slides were not there, but we got there in the end. I think I was just blown away by your general eloquence in those first few minutes, and forgot that they needed the support of slides. But I'm really fascinated personally by these two angles that you've kind of brought to us today around the kind of data as a commodity, and helping us think about schools as places that are collecting data that, rightly or wrongly, may have a value attached to them, notwithstanding what we might do with that data, but we have a value, and we maybe need to think about what that means and the implications. And then this other question around e-privacy, and so much of our work, certainly in Brussels, and I know many of the schools here are working more and more on inbound marketing and digital marketing, and that horizon, we're just kind of getting used to that, and it feels as though maybe that some of those future foundations are going to shift.
It does, yeah. And what we've done, for example, at 9 is, we've had to reimagine how we do our marketing. So there are two, to give you an example, there are two, we do 2 webinars, one on privacy, one on cybersecurity each month, and you have to register for those, and that's it. But then that's the only time we collect personal data, and we then tell you that we're doing those things to come again. And everything else we're doing is we're putting free on YouTube, because we know that if we put good content out there, people will contact us anyway. But it's how we articulate what we do in the right way to engage people, because we can't be tracking people with the e-privacy regulation unless you get explicit consent, and it's unlikely people are going to give you that explicit consent.
Mm-hmm. So as we go into breakout groups now, I would encourage us all to take some of the, in a sense, unpack it a little bit. And I'm sure that part of what we will be unpacking is not our knowledge of this area, but as much what we don't know. And it may be that we have 2 or 3 questions that we want to note down in the groups that we want to just bring back to the group, and maybe while Mark is here, get some of his expertise and insights just to give us some pointers to some of those questions. So it could be, what's sticking in terms of things that we want to really unpack and build on, or it could be that we say, yeah, this is raising some questions, and let's use the time to kind of brainstorm 2 or 3 questions that we can bring back to the group. So I'm going to put us, Mark, if you stop sharing your screen for a second, and then I will put us into breakout groups. We will come back in about 15 minutes. And as usual, good luck. safe journey towards your breakout group. Welcome back, everyone.
Thank you.
So I'm curious, what kinds of things were coming up in your groups?
Aaron had some quite good points.
And Mark's going to share all about them.
But Aaron was saying that when you were looking at with e-privacy, the whole of tagging people and cookies and that's sort of like going the way of the it is going. But Aaron's view is that that's something coming with the past 7 years, right? It's just a natural progression where we are. I mean, Aaron, you said something about the what I looked about the AdWords.
What's interesting is we got to the point where we realized the e-directive may have all of us as schools totally need to rethink how we do our digital marketing, and specifically for those schools who've been targeting families through whether it was AdWords 7 years ago or some type of a more developed social media campaign now where you're paying across a number of platforms, or maybe you've even grown up and you're doing a drip campaign and people are being sort of guided through a rabbit hole, and you're watching your inquiry move through different things that you've decided because you want to tell a story. All of that's been happening. But what I was suggesting to Mark is that we've also all been moving away from this idea that that's all you have to do to get good quality leads at the end. Because all of schools have been dumping money into this, generating lots of leads. Everyone gets to show, look at this, we spent this amount of money and we have this number of new leads. But at the end of the day, if they don't land on a site that is inspiring, that has a bunch of relevant new content, that's thoughtful and connected to how the school changes the child, then all you've done is brought people to a site for them to click around for a while and probably not even call your admissions director, right? And so that was kind of my point. And so e-privacy, this directive, is sort of pushing us off a cliff that I think we were pretty much going to jump off anyway. With digital marketing, let me be clear, only with digital marketing. There's a lot of other things we can talk about this, because we also talked a bit about parents and students and who really cares about this and how they feel about the data set and whether it can be shared or not. And I think there's a lot there for schools. We've always been protective of our data, and we've always been protective of the access we allow anyone to have to our community. But I don't think we're going to change on that either. Stop talking, so everyone else say something else.
What did other groups come up with? Did they have an Aaron in every group, or did your conversation go in other directions?
I was went in a little bit of a different direction in some way, because we all agreed that there was absolutely no point in having thousands and thousands and thousands of leads if they're all really bad quality in the first place. And what people, pre-GDPR, people just had really sloppy ways of keeping contacts, and then they would archive them if they didn't show interest, biting some emails that they'd sent before. So actually GDPR is not a bad thing for actually tightening up why on earth you need that data in the first place. And when you think about it, qualified leads, they'll get in touch with the school. If they want their kid to go to the school, they're going to come on a visit. Most of you operate in cities where there's a limited number of schools that they're going to visit round anyway. So when you hit your threshold, when they come into your school virtually or physically, that's the point that there should be no surprises. and they've assumed that they've already made their decision to purchase. So then it's just a case of trying not to muck up that bit of the process by not answering the questions that they've got. We talked also about relationship building. So using quality content that offers value every step of the way over time, so that your current parents and alumni and older alumni talk about the school and talk about interesting content, interesting ideas coming from the school. Most alumni don't have a clue what goes on inside the school. And the newsletters are never really directed towards them. It's about what's going on in the school today. So contextualizing the school in current events, in what's going on around the world, and showing that you're part of that world, not a bubble operating in isolation from it. Because it's that long-term relationship that's going to make someone say, I wouldn't dream of going to any other school other than ... And that's hard. That means you've got to have people who can write about big ideas, current context, and bring it back to what it means for the school without needing to get it signed off by the director every week.
So one of the things I'm hearing us saying is that this is an evolution, that the e-privacy regulation may be just highlighting the fact that some of this may have been a cul-de-sac anyway, or at least a marketing red herring, and that in the end it's about the quality of our product and the quality of our communication.
There's a reason that most ClickFunnels successes are ClickFunnels specialists. You know, that it's like a perpetual thing that they believe as long as you have tens of thousands of leads, they'll convert. It's not true, and it's just not true for international schools. It never was.
Mm-hmm. Did people, were other people coming up with questions about what was coming down the line? Did anyone brainstorm a question or two?
Alec, you had a question.
Yeah, I guess I just feel a bit handcuffed around what our own GDPR group is doing here. For instance, telling us that we can't keep, a separate database of our influencers within our community because it's somehow separate from our, our main business of education, and the ways in which people have to opt in instead of like for our alumni that we have to have that. So I guess I don't know how to phrase the question. Possibly. Whether or not that there could be some kind of an auditing process. It just seems that the GDPR doesn't differentiate between schools very well, that there's kind of a one size fits all. And I'm wondering if there's any way the GDPR down the line might look at a school and have a way in which a school makes a commitment or a commitment to disavow the kind of tools it might use so that it could have a different way of, of having to engage with GDPR. But it just seems to be this one size fits all kinds of school doesn't fit very well.
So with that one, so you've got a database of your influencers, let's say, there's no reason why you couldn't use what's called the lawful basis of legitimate interests for you to keep that data in a separate database. There's no reason. You're being told falsehoods if you say that's not something you can do. It's the next thing is, okay, well, how do you legally communicate with those influencers in a way that is compliant with whereabouts are you?
Germany.
In Germany,
a place where they like to follow rules really well.
Yeah, they love a good rule. And also, you've got with the federal nature of Germany, you've then got the country level, then you've got your sort of local federal law. So I think you need to you can still probably get away with communicating with those people. It needs some looking at, but there are ways and means, and essentially we take what's called a risk-based approach to everything we do with data protection. And data protection law is a risk-based law. It's okay, what are the risks of doing this versus not doing this? And if there's a risk that by not communicating with a certain group of people, there's a significant detriment to the organization, then you probably, on balance, you can get away with communicating with them in a way that you deem there's a soft opt-in because you've always communicated them over a period of time, and those people have an express interest within the school. So I think it's looking at those. So it's basically the GDPR does fit schools quite well if you take a risk-based approach. If you say that you can't, if you use the approach that, oh no, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that, because the GDPR says so, then you'll always fall into that trap. But the GDPR never says you can't do something. It says what are the risks on the rights and freedoms of your data subjects. So basically, the people who are expecting the emails off of you, if they don't receive the email, what's the damage versus if they do receive the email? And if they do receive the email, then I'm pretty sure no one's going to be offended if they receive that email because they've always had that email off of you. That's sort of balancing act that you go through. If you just go and buy a database full of people and then start communicating with them about how great the school is, that's a completely different kettle of fish versus where you currently are.
Yeah, I guess what I was also struggling with was, it seems to me, I don't know if this is a good analogy or not, back in the days when a teacher could put a hand on a child or give a child a hug at the end of the day, and then so much happened that teachers became afraid, and there was in schools almost a guilty until proven innocent aspect in terms of physical contact between an adult and a child. And that seems to have kind of happened with GDPR around data, that schools feel like we're a bit guilty, or there's a distrust with schools and data that GDPR has brought about that maybe is valid, but is getting a little bit hard to overcome sometimes, because anything that has to do with data seems to be somehow as dirty, when in many ways we want to use that data to help a family.
Yeah, which is a legitimate reason to so you can do that. Now what may be required is that you have to go through another step of documenting it. Well, the GDPR requires you to document it. So if you want to use it, that's fine. You just go through and do what's called a DPIA, which, by the way, we have an app for. So if you're interested in an app, we have the solution, and you go through and that's the balancing act. Just go, what's the benefit? So one of my slides, but if I just share my screen, right? Because this is like one of your get out cards as well. Okay. So is it which screen is it? The presentation deck showing?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. So here. So one of the things you can rely upon as to why you're processing personal data is to meet the obligations set out within the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. So you all should be familiar with this. If not, then you need to become familiar with, because what it gives is that, and this is set within all. There's only 2 countries across the world that aren't signed up to this international law. So you as a school, you are offsetting your obligations under international law to ensure the child's right to health, to ensure the child's right to an education, to ensure the care, protection, and safety of the child. So there may be certain things that you are doing to meet those things that are set out within the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. And those are quite often, we find that schools aren't using those things because it's misunderstood. So quite often you can do generally anything that you want with the data that you hold within the school, but you have to align it back to the specific reason why you're doing it. And it could be that because it's something to do with child protection or mental health, and that goes back to the child's right to health, right? So there are things there that you can do, and that is probably through a training issue rather than anything else. A training issue and not taking a risk-based approach.
I think there's at least one group that hasn't asked a question or summarized what they were talking about.
Yeah, we were wondering if you could expand a little bit on the idea that you had about the YouTube and explain your logic, and you were saying how you were looking as an organization to promote more your business through YouTube. Could you expand on that, please?
Yeah. So the concept here is that first of all, people responding to email chains, if you do like an email sequence of content, isn't that isn't that successful. And with the e-privacy directive, we have to find a way to engage our audience and build that audience in a way that is natural, where people do not feel that every time they come to a website or they come to a resource that they've got gated content. Because if I see gated content, worth my name in anything. I just don't do it because I know that someone's going to give me a phone call. Even if I want to get access to it, I'm naturally, I don't want to do it, right? And the reason, and one of sort of my own behavior is that I just want to learn more about that product or that service or that topic. And there's all these barriers in place that stop me from doing it, and also it gives me personally my own negative view of that organization, because all I want to do is explore about them. So what we are trying is that we will do, we start off with a small group, and there's only like, I don't know, 60 people, 50 or 60 people that did our first webinar. Then it went to 80 people, and this last one we had 140 people on it. And then it's like just word of mouth that each month coming there, you go to the 9 education cyber, because you learn about cybersecurity. Yes, there is a slightly softer undertone around selling, but actually 90% of the content is all really useful stuff. And so, so you come to it, you sign up just so you know when the webinar is, because we don't always do it on the same week, depending on how busy we are. And so we push it out, and then we stick it on YouTube, and we put it on YouTube to get it to a wider audience of people who are interested in that topic, who would then want to know when the next one is. So they then sign up they come to our website, sign up to the next one, and then they get the notification. And then also, if I'm a school leader, let's say I'm a director of IT, and I'm trying to get budget to do some cybersecurity tests, I can watch I can join the webinar, but then I can send the YouTube link to my school director, who doesn't have to sign up, so that they are influenced in terms of understanding and educated around the concepts. And they go, oh yeah, actually here's $5,000, whatever it is. So it sort of makes it easier for the people who we're trying to influence. Once they've bought into the brand, it makes it easier for them to influence the other people that they are trying to influence to buy our services. So in the concept of a school environment, it's like one parent accessing the data and then going, well, actually, I want to show you the other half or the stuff, and making it really easy for them to access. So once they're engaged, I think Ewan made a very good point. Once you've got someone to the door, it's all about making sure you make it really, really easy for them and give them really good content. And I'm not saying that's going to work. That's just a strategy that we're trying at the moment. We're going to see whether that works and works over time. Yeah. The other sort of analogy I used was, Aaron, the answer to your question is I got the drill. So I'm dry lining a garage at the moment to make it like a gym, and my drill broke yesterday. So I was like, bloody drill, right? I need to go find another drill, and I like my Ryobi drill. So I just went online and the best different drills to the Ryobi, and I just come to like the bestdrillwebsite.com, and all it is telling me what the best drills are. And I go on there and I read all the reviews. And I go, okay, I'm influenced that I've got a decent drill, so I'm going to go to B&Q now and buy it because I know it's a decent view. So, and one of the things that we've been doing from 9 over the past 3 or 4 years is to build partnerships with reliable sources who can then be a point of reference for 9 for other people going to buy our services. So with the Council of International Schools, affiliate consultant for data protection and cybersecurity, ICASIA now, affiliate consultant for data protection and cybersecurity, Japan Council of International Schools, data, cyber, safeguarding, ISAT in Thailand. And we have those reference points, and people can go to there, they can see that 9 are credible, and that they'll go, actually, I'm more influenced based on the stories that those organizations have told about 9. And we find we get traction a lot quicker and more people to the door. So from your perspective, in terms of your locations, what are the influential, where are those points of reference? Is it, bestscoresinbrussels.com? That can help build those reference points. Is it the local athletics club or the local football club that having I don't know what they are, but there will be points of reference that may be slightly more difficult for you to identify. That if people are looking to go to an international school in Zurich or in Bangkok, the parents will go to be influenced, and then they'll go there to be influenced, and then they want to get free content to understand more about the school rather than going to gated content and then knowing that they may. But from your perspective, it just means that you haven't got that open pipeline of knowing where who's looking at your stuff. But you can see upticks in you use other measures. I'm just talking. So David, what do you reckon? Or anyone else?
I was going to just add to what you were saying. I think that the pitching your expertise, your thought leadership works really well in B2B. Absolutely. And so that might be really strong with the corporate clients that schools are trying to bring on board over the longer term. For the B2C, where you've got a sense of, there's 1,000 fires to spark, it maybe works less well. And the reason is because most international schools are generic to the point that they really do look the same. Parents are really ill-informed about what to look for. They don't even know which questions to ask. And they don't get to put their kid into a new school that often in their lifetime. Admissions directors know that game a lot better. So how are you going to become the trusted source that tells them not just how great your school is, but really, before they even come to making that decision, is the authoritative voice on schools for kids who are like this? And it takes courage, because most schools really don't know what they stand for. They don't know who they are. Their missions are bland and samey, and that's not in your favor. So if you can change your message, know what you really stand for, then it makes your thought leadership possible.
So here we are, we're just past the hour, and what may have begun at the beginning of the hour as oh no, GDPR again, like the ghost of Christmas past. Here we are discussing actually something around the future of our schools, the messaging associated with it, maybe going back to something far more basic that we've always known, that in the end, it's the quality of the school and the references from our own students, our own parents, the word of mouth, that ultimately is what is going to sell the school. And that this, even though we're seeing, we've seen a wave with inbound marketing, digital marketing, and some of those strategies will no doubt continue. I think it's kind of a reminder for me, at least. And Mark, by taking us up to that 30,000 foot level, I think you've kind of helped us gain some perspective about, how it is that people purchase education and what's important for them, and also really referencing that mandate that we have to safeguard and be responsible for the data that we have, for the sake of the children and the families. So, Mark, thank you so much for being with us, and we really appreciate that. No doubt we will see you somewhere in the stratosphere of data privacy and GDPR in the near future.